The first thing Karen Barton tried to steal from me wasn't money, it was reality. She stood on my driveway in designer sunglasses and told a police officer my land belonged to her HOA, now like my deed was just a rough draft and she was the final editor. Being annexed by a woman with a clipboard was new. My name's Nick Dalton. I'm a retired Navy vet, and I'm not the kind of man who goes looking for drama. I like quiet, honest work, black coffee paid bills, and enough space to hear the wind in the trees. That's why I bought my place outside Silver Lakes, 10 acres, an old house, and most importantly, no HOA. No dues, no committees, no neighborhood hall monitors, pretending beige is a personality. The listing was clear, the deed was clearer, and I kept copies of everything in a folder labeled Proof I'm Not in the HOA. The first 6 months were about perfect. I rebuilt the deck, fixed the shed, planted tomatoes out back, and started feeling something I hadn't felt in years: settled. After years of temporary addresses, that place felt like mine in a bone-deep way. Then one afternoon, I opened my mailbox and found a violation notice from the Silver Lakes Homeowners Association. I laughed so hard I had to read it twice. According to the notice, I was in violation for an unapproved fence, a visible outbuilding lacking neutral color compliance, and my favorite, a non-standard mailbox. Apparently, my black steel mailbox was a threat to suburban order. I figured it had to be a mistake, so I grabbed my paperwork and drove to the HOA office thinking I'd clear it up in 10 minutes. Instead, I walked into a building that smelled like lemon cleaner and passive aggression. Karen was in a glass conference room running a meeting for board members dressed like they'd declared war on fun. I told her there had been a mistake. My property wasn't part of Silver Lakes. My deed said so, the county map said so, and my realtor had said so more times than I could count. Karen smiled, tight-polished, predatory. She told me my parcel had been added to a revised 2020 community map. She said my land was now considered Lot 47 under a boundary realignment tied to neighborhood growth. I told her my land was private land legally outside their subdivision. Then she said, unless you formally withdraw, you are considered a member. That was the moment I knew this wasn't confusion, it was a setup. I told her there was nothing to withdraw from because I had never joined anything. She told me to submit my documents for review and said that until then, daily fines would continue. That night, I spread every document I had across my kitchen table: deed plat map, tax records, county GIS, screenshots, closing papers. Every page said the same thing. My lot was outside the HOA boundary. I made copies, built a binder, and went to bed thinking facts would end this. The next morning, a yellow laminated final warning was taped to my front door. It said I already owed $1,000. I stood there barefoot in my own doorway, holding a fine from an HOA I didn't belong to, and felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't a mistake. This was pressure. It escalated the very next day. I woke up to gravel crunching and looked out the window to see 2 HOA inspectors walking my property with clipboards, tape measures, and a camera. One was measuring my fence, the other was taking pictures of my shed. I went outside and told them to get off my land. The taller one said they had authority to inspect any home in violation. I pointed to the no trespassing sign and said, not this one. Then he snapped a photo right in my face and called the police, saying he had an aggressive homeowner obstructing an HOA inspection. So I called too and reported 2 trespassers refusing to leave private property. When the officer arrived, I handed him my deed and parcel map. The inspector shoved a tablet in his face with their revised jurisdiction map. He looked at both, frowned, and asked why the records contradicted each other. One of the inspectors actually said maybe I had forged the county deed. Then Karen showed up in a white Range Rover. She told the officer I was unstable, aggressive, and refusing to comply with community procedures. I told the officer I wanted them charged with trespassing. Karen snapped, "You can't do that. This is association jurisdiction." The officer said, "Ma'am, this is county jurisdiction." He ordered the inspectors off my property. Karen stayed just long enough to tell me it wasn't over, and I believed her. 3 days later, I got a certified envelope. Inside was a notice of compulsory community reclassification. According to Karen, the HOA had voted to absorb my property retroactively. There were maps showing my land swallowed into their borders, backdated forms, and a page claiming the previous owner had intended to join Silver Lakes voluntarily. The previous owner was dead. I knew that because I'd been to his estate auction. That was the moment I stopped treating Karen like a bully and started treating her like a criminal. I dug through county archives, old plats, tax histories, HOA filings, anything I could get my hands on. Every older record showed the same thing: my land had never been part of Silver Lakes. But the deeper I looked, the uglier it got. I found other edge properties pulled into similar disputes, then sold cheap. And one name kept surfacing behind those sales: Sundown Equity. That was the first twist. This wasn't about standards. It was a land grab scheme. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was manufacturing conflict-tanking property value and steering targeted lots toward a shell company. I still needed proof, and that proof knocked on my door after dark. His name was David Lang, one of the HOA board members. At my kitchen table, he told me the board had never legally voted to annex my land. Karen had staged a private session with 2 loyal members, created fake minutes later, and filed them as if the vote had passed unanimously. Then he slid a folder across the table, internal emails, draft minutes, and acquisition paperwork already prepared in case I sold under pressure. One email from Karen said, "Create pressure, he'll crack." The next morning, I called Linda Ortega, a real estate attorney with no patience for suburban fraud. She reviewed the documents and said, "Nick, this isn't a dispute. This is a scheme." For the next week, my life became binders, backups, affidavits, and caffeine. I cross-checked notary logs, archived county records, installed cameras, and built a clean timeline. Linda found that one signature had been witnessed by a notary whose license had expired 2 years earlier. Dead owner ghost notary. At first, neighbors were scared. But once one person started talking, others followed. A retired couple got fined over a hummingbird feeder. A family got cited for sidewalk chalk. A single dad got threatened over a wheelchair ramp for his mother. Rosa, a nurse, told me Karen once threatened child services over a car parked on the street during a teenage sleepover. That's when the whole picture snapped into focus. Karen didn't rule that neighborhood with bylaws. She ruled it with fear. So I organized a meeting at the local park. I expected 10 people. 32 showed up. I brought folders, screenshots, copies of contradictory notices, and one by one people told their stories. Angry stories, embarrassed stories, stories that all had the same thing underneath: isolation. That was the second twist. It stopped being my fight. It became everybody's. Linda filed suit against Karen and the HOA for fraud, defamation, tortious interference, and civil conspiracy. We held a press conference at the county building. I stood behind a folding table with 2 thick binders and told the cameras exactly what Karen had been doing. Forged documents, fake authority, targeted, harassment, shell company, land grabs. Karen answered the way guilty people usually do: outrage, threats, lawyers. By the time we got to court, the room was packed. Karen came in dressed for battle. I came in dressed like a man who kept receipts. Then Linda dismantled her. She walked the judge through the false notices, the trespassing, the backdated maps, the fake board minutes, the shell company, the forged dead man's signature, and the pre-written acquisition documents with my name already typed in. David testified about the sham vote. The surveyor confirmed my land had never been inside the HOA boundary. Neighbors testified about years of selective harassment. The judge ruled from the bench. My property was outside the legal jurisdiction of Silver Lakes. Every fine and enforcement action against me was void. The HOA had abused its authority. Karen had engaged in fraudulent misrepresentation and willful harassment, and the matter was being referred to the district attorney for possible criminal charges. Karen resigned 3 days later in a cold little email about personal reasons. Then the county started pulling financial records. More shell companies surfaced, fake vendors, misallocated funds. The whole operation began collapsing in public. The HOA lost its enforcement power. Board members quit. Residents demanded transparency. Rosa ran for the new advisory council and won. The Swansons hosted a barbecue. People who used to hide behind curtains started talking in driveways again, like they remembered they were neighbors, not hostages. 6 months later, Karen was indicted. Fraudulent misrepresentation, document forgery, attempted unlawful acquisition of real property by coercion. Not everything she deserved, maybe, but enough to turn her little kingdom into rubble. And that's the part that stayed with me. I thought winning would feel loud, like revenge, like fireworks. But it didn't. It felt clear. Because the real lesson wasn't just that corruption can lose. It was that petty power survives by isolating people. It feeds on fear, embarrassment, and silence. It grows when decent folks think fighting back isn't worth the trouble. The second people start comparing notes, saving proof, and refusing to be bullied alone, the whole machine starts choking on daylight. I still live on the same 10 acres, same fence, same mailbox. Karen hated so much There's a swing hanging from the oak tree now, and some evenings I sit on the porch with a cup of coffee and listen to the neighborhood sound, normal again, dogs barking, kids laughing, somebody burning burgers 2 houses over, real life, a little messy, completely human. So let me ask you this, when does enforcing standards become abuse? And if somebody hides greed behind rules and paperwork, do they deserve understanding or consequences? Tell me what you think. Who was right? Who was wrong? And have you ever dealt with an HOA, a boss, or a petty little tyrant who confused power with ownership?